What would you do if a $150 million fighter jet was about to crash straight into a crowd of 30,000 people, and the only person who could stop it had been hiding in plain sight for 12 years? This isn't a movie trailer, it's a true story. A voice crackled over the radio with a code no one understood, except her. They called her Valkyrie once, the Top Gun pilot who vanished after a tragedy no one dared to speak about. And in the next 7 minutes, the world would learn whether a so-called ordinary woman could still command the sky. Stick with me, because the twist waiting in the cockpit will leave you breathless. And if you believe stories like this deserve to be told, hit subscribe to A Simple Woman right now, because this is only the beginning. What would you do if a fighter jet worth $150 million was about to fall from the sky and crash into 30,000 people, and the only person who could stop it had been hiding in plain sight for 12 years? This is not a trailer. This happened. A voice broke through the static of the emergency radio with a code no one had used in over a decade. Glass Orchard. Valkyrie, if you can hear this, lead him home. For a moment the entire base froze, and at the edge of the crowd stood a woman in a faded hoodie and sneakers, a woman everyone thought was just another anonymous face. Her name was Lena Hart, once the Navy's most lethal instructor, call sign Valkyrie. And today, the sky was calling her back. The Airshow had started like any other celebration of American air power. Families spread blankets on the grass, kids waved cheap plastic flags, and food trucks roasted the smell of grease and sugar into the summer air. A brass band had just finished its number when the first Raptor roared past the bleachers, its silver-grey frame cutting against the blue. Cameras lifted, cheers rose, and for most, this was just spectacle. For Lena Hart, it was a battlefield she thought she had left behind forever. She stood near the back fence, away from the noise, her dark hair pulled tight, her eyes hidden beneath the shadow of a cap. In her pocket, her fingers traced the shape of a small metal keychain, a tiny jet that once dangled from the zipper of her flight suit. It was the only piece of her past she had allowed herself to keep. Every other part of Valkyrie was buried. No one around her knew her name. To them, she was just a woman alone, perhaps a tourist who had wandered in, perhaps someone's mother waiting for her kid. A vendor barked at her as he shoved t-shirts into bags. "Hey lady, you lost? This ain't yoga class." Laughter followed, sharp and careless. She didn't flinch. She had been living with words like that for over a decade, letting them pass through her as though her body was stone. She pressed her thumb harder into the edge of the keychain until it bit her skin, then lifted her eyes back to the sky. The Raptors climbed, looped, and rolled in precision. They were beautiful. They were also fragile machines, one mistake away from fire. On the far side of the field, a young girl pointed at Lena. "Daddy, why is she standing there all alone? She doesn't even look like she likes planes." The father shrugged, pulling his sunglasses down. "Probably lost. Don't worry about her." The words sank into the air around them like small stones, unimportant to most, but each one layered on the silence Lena carried. She had chosen this life, teaching yoga at a community center, cashing small checks, pretending that she was someone who had never flown faster than the speed of sound. It was safer this way, safe from questions, safe from the past, but safe doesn't last forever. The roar shifted pitch, a crack split the sky, gasps rippled across the bleachers. One of the Raptors lurched sideways, smoke trailing from its right engine. Over the loudspeakers came the clipped voice of the tower. "Mayday, mayday." F-22 experiencing flameout, pilot unable to stabilize, chaos spread like fire in dry grass, parents grabbed children, vendors abandoned their stands, phones rose to capture disaster, the jet spiraled, dipping lower, cutting jagged scars across the clouds. Every eye turned upward, every breath hitched, and in the midst of it all Lena Hart went perfectly still. Her hand closed around the keychain so tightly it drew blood. "Someone get me an instructor, anyone with hours on a Raptor," the control tower commander's voice thundered across the loudspeakers. Officers rushed, scanning the crowd, but no one stepped forward. No one could. The Raptor was a beast only a handful of pilots on Earth had mastered, and most of them were gone, retired or dead. For 12 years Lena had been silent. For 12 years she had walked past hangars and control towers like a ghost, carrying a weight no one else could see. And now, with 30,000 people below the falling jet, silence was no longer an option. Beside her, a group of young men in mirrored sunglasses laughed nervously, mistaking the tension for a spectacle. "Yo, check her out," one said, pointing at Lena. "Think she's going to fix that jet with her yoga moves?" Another chimed in, "Bet she doesn't even know what an F-22 is." They tossed their soda cans onto the gravel and smirked, their voices blurred into background noise. Lena's eyes were locked on the wounded jet, each wobble pulling her deeper into memories she had buried. The last time she had heard a mayday this desperate, it had ended with fire on the ocean and the death of a man she had sworn to protect. A volunteer in a yellow vest hustled over, clipboard tight in her hands. "Ma'am, this area is for VIPs only. You don't belong here." Her smile was tight, her tone even tighter. The crowd turned to watch, expecting Lena to shrink back. Instead, Lena's gaze didn't waver. "I'm where I need to be." The words came quiet, but they carried like steel. The volunteer faltered, muttered something under her breath and moved away. Near the control tower, Colonel Avery Pike stormed out, his buzzcut gleaming with sweat. His voice boomed across the chaos. "Is there anyone here who can fly a Raptor?" Silence answered. Phones streamed live feeds, reporters whispered about catastrophe, and in the corner of the frame, cameras caught a woman in a hoodie stepping past the barrier. She walked with steady purpose toward the command post. The jeers dimmed. Even the laughter of the young men faltered. There was something in the way she moved, measured, unhurried, like a soldier walking back into fire she already knew. The retired pilot Jack Donnelly squinted through the crowd, his beer halfway to his mouth. Recognition flickered in his eyes, half memory, half disbelief. "No," he whispered. "It can't be her." Inside the tower, radios screamed, officers barked orders, and screens glowed red with alerts. The injured Raptor circled lower, flames licking its wing. The young pilot's voice cracked over comms. "I can't hold it. I'm going down." Panic surged, and then the door creaked open, and in stepped Lena Hart. She looked like no one important, plain clothes, sweat at her temples, but her eyes were cold fire. She reached into her pocket, pulled out a worn leather case and flipped it open on the desk. The room fell silent. The badge inside caught the light. Navy Fighter Weapons School, instructor, call sign Valkyrie. Colonel Pike's breath caught. "God help us," he murmured. "It's her." The badge on the desk gleamed like a ghost resurrected. For a full heartbeat, no one spoke, no one moved. Then voices erupted all at once, snorts of disbelief, whispers of recognition, the hiss of resentment. Major Trent Halverson, square-jawed and sharp with authority, sneered openly. "This is a mistake. She's been gone for 12 years. Rust doesn't even begin to cover it. She couldn't fly a kite, let alone a Raptor." His words were knives, meant to slice away any chance Lena had of stepping into the fight. But her eyes stayed locked on Colonel Avery Pike. The two of them had never served together, but he knew the name, the reputation, the training scores that had once broken records, and he saw the steel in her gaze now, the kind that didn't come from ego but from scars. "Colonel," Lena said quietly, "open the hangar." Murmurs rippled through the control room. A young officer with ambitious eyes shook his head, smirking. "She's chasing glory. That jet out there will explode. She'll kill the kid and herself trying to play hero." Another technician added under his breath, loud enough for all to hear. 12 years in hiding. Reflexes fossilized. "This is suicide theater." Laughter snickered through the room, desperate, defensive. Lena ignored it all. She had learned long ago that people would always talk, especially the ones who had never pulled 7 Gs in a vertical climb while missiles screamed at their tail. She set the leather case down and adjusted her shoulders. She looked smaller than most of the men in the room, but her presence pressed against them like weight. Colonel Pike finally nodded. "Get her a bird," Halvorsen exploded. "Sir, with respect, this is insane. She left because she couldn't handle the cockpit. You put her up there and you'll have 2 body bags instead of 1. His face burned crimson. He didn't say the rest of it, but Lena heard it anyway. He was there 12 years ago. He knew the whispers. He had helped craft them. She had been the scapegoat when the training mission went wrong, when Noah Reyes died in fire. She carried the blame so the careers of others could stay untouched, and Halvorsen was one of those careers. The word Mayday still rang in her ears, but beneath it came another voice, a memory buried in the roar of engines. Marco's voice. "If this ever goes wrong, Valkyrie, you lead them out. That's your gift. You don't fly for yourself. You fly for the one beside you." She had failed him that day, or so she had believed. Failed him and carried his death on her shoulders through every silent year that followed. Now the call sign Reyes was back on the comms. Not Marco, his son. The revelation had punched through the static as Lena scanned the manifest moments earlier. Noah Reyes. A young pilot with the same eyes, the same restless ambition as his father. And he was the one spiraling toward death above 30,000 souls. Her heart clenched like a fist. She could feel the tremor in her hands as she closed the badge case. The ghosts had come full circle. "I'm not doing this for glory," she said softly, almost to herself. "I'm doing it because I won't let another Reyes burn because of me." Pike heard the words and something shifted in his face. He turned to the room. "Clear the path. Open hangar 2. The order cut through resistance like a blade. Officers scrambled, keys clattered against consoles, radios crackled with commands. Halvorsen slammed his fist on the desk. "You'll regret this, sir. She's finished. 12 years and you think she can just walk back in?" Pike didn't answer. He only looked at Lena, searching for doubt. She gave him none. Outside, the hangar doors rumbled open, a cavern of steel yawning into the daylight. Technicians rushed around a backup Raptor, its skin gleaming with potential, its systems waiting. They looked up at her with open skepticism. One muttered, "She'll choke before the gear even lifts." Another smirked, "Probably just wants the cameras." But one, Sergeant Maya Chen, folded her arms and frowned. She wasn't mocking. She was worried. She leaned close to Lena as she climbed the ladder. "The fuel dump system is locked. You'll be carrying too much weight on landing. That jet up there won't have margin for error. Neither will you." Lena paused, hand on the rail, eyes narrowing. "How long?" 7 minutes, maybe less. Lena drew a slow breath. She had been counting time since the Mayday call. Every second shaved down the margin of life. 7 minutes meant 5, maybe 4 by the time she reached altitude. Her chest tightened, but she forced her hands to steady as she slipped into the cockpit. The seat embraced her like an old enemy, both familiar and threatening. Her fingers moved over the straps, the buckles, the stick. Muscle memory sang in her bones, and for a terrifying moment she felt the old rush, the intoxicating flood of control, the joy of power. She crushed it. This wasn't about joy, this was about debt. Through the canopy she could see the wounded jet trailing black smoke circling lower. The voice of Noah Reyes cracked again over comms. "I can't. Systems are failing. I don't know what else to—" Lena's voice cut in, calm, measured, unyielding. "Listen to me, Reyes, you're not alone. Match my climb. I'll get you home." The tower froze at the sound. Even Halvorsen's anger stalled. There was no tremor in her tone, no hint of hesitation, only command carved from years of fire. The young pilot's breathing steadied, if only slightly. He whispered back, "Copy." The engines roared to life beneath her. The jet surged forward, the hangar walls trembling with the force. Ground crews shouted, some waving her back, others shielding their eyes from the heat. The Raptor broke into the sunlight, wheels hitting the asphalt, nose lifting. Gravity pressed her spine into the seat, and just like that, 12 years of silence cracked open. Valkyrie was in the sky again. The runway blurred beneath Lena's jet as she lifted into the sky, the horizon snapping wide open in front of her. The roar of the engines pinned her back against the seat, but her hands were steady, her eyes locked on the crippled Raptor bleeding smoke above the field. She climbed fast, cutting through clouds with precision that betrayed no hint of the years she had spent away. Below, the crowd had fallen into stunned silence, their phones capturing what they thought would be a tragedy but now couldn't look away from. Valkyrie was airborne again, though most didn't yet know what that meant. The control tower buzzed with voices. Colonel Pike leaned forward over the consoles, tracking her ascent. She's climbing. She's actually climbing clean. But the disbelief in the room still lingered, thick and choking. Halvorsen paced like a caged predator, spitting venom with every breath. She'll never sync with him. The systems are too advanced now. She's obsolete. In Lena's helmet, Noah Reyes' voice crackled. Controls fried. I've lost half my avionics. I can't. His breathing was ragged, teetering on panic. Lena cut in, crisp and cold. Breathe. Eyes forward. Keep your wings level. I'm closing in. The radio fell quiet except for his shallow breaths. It was enough. He steadied just long enough for her to slide up alongside him, their two Raptors carving across the sky together. For a heartbeat it was almost like the past, two fighters wing to wing, survival bound to trust. Except this time Marco wasn't there, his son was, and Lena could feel the weight of his blood pressing against her ribs. She edged closer, her voice carrying authority. Noah, match my role. Small inputs, not big swings. Let me set the rhythm. There was hesitation. Then you know my name. Lena's throat tightened. She hadn't meant to let it slip. Focus on the controls, she said. But Noah pushed. You're Valkyrie. You're the one they blamed for my father. His words were a blade. Static hissed between them, but the silence carried accusation. Why should I trust you? A grip tightened on the stick. The past crashed against the present, brutal and unrelenting. She forced the truth through clenched teeth. Because your father did. He trusted me with his last breath, and I won't fail him again. Noah's breathing spiked, then steadied as if the confession itself had given him something to hold on to. His jet wobbled, then corrected. For the first time, his voice didn't break, then lead. Down below, Sergeant Maya Chen scanned the telemetry pouring across her screen. Her heart jolted. She grabbed her headset. Colonel, fuel dump is locked. His Raptor's still carrying full tanks. Weight's critical. If he tries to land like this, the gear will shear. He'll explode on touchdown. Pike's face went rigid. Options, none that buy time, Maya said. They've got minutes at best, less if the fire spreads. Halvorsen seized the moment like a vulture. You see? Impossible. She's dragging him to a grave. Ground her now before she kills them both. But Pike didn't move. His eyes stayed on the screens, on the woman guiding a burning jet with calm defiance. He whispered more to himself than anyone else. She's doing what none of you could. In the sky, Lena's instruments flashed warnings, lights strobing across the HUD. She knew the fuel dump was dead. She didn't need Maya's voice in her ear to confirm it. She calculated quickly. Landing weight too high, margins non-existent. She swallowed the grim reality. We'll deal with the weight later. Right now we stabilize. She called out commands, nose 2 degrees down. Trim left rudder. Good. Hold that. Copy my climb. Noah's jet, though wounded, shadowed her moves. Their wings drew level again, smoke from his fuselage trailing into the sun. And then the next blow landed. A frantic voice cut in from ground control. Runway 1 is blocked. C-17 transport seized hydraulics. It stuck mid-strip. The room erupted. Technicians cursed. Officers shouted over one another. The primary runway was the only one long enough to handle an emergency landing of a fully loaded Raptor. Without it, the odds plummeted to near zero. Lena's jaw clenched as the news hit her headset. Say again, the voice repeated, desperate. Runway 1 is blocked, only auxiliary available. It's 800 feet shorter. and crosswinds are climbing. Her chest tightened. Short runway, overweight jet, a pilot half-conscious with fear. Any one of those was a death sentence. Combined, it was suicide. Halvorson's voice blasted across the channel, triumphant. "It's over! Pull her back before she crashes both birds! God damn it, Pike, ground her!" But Pike's voice cut firm. "Negative, she's lead." She makes the call. For a moment, Lena closed her eyes. The ghosts surged again, Marco's jet spinning out, fire blooming across the waves, her voice screaming commands he couldn't follow. She had carried the sound of his final breath through every sleepless night. And now his son's voice was in her ear, breaking, begging. "I don't think I can hold it, ma'am. It's burning. Everything's burning." Her reply came like stone. "You can, you will, stay with me." The wounded jet juddered, alarms screaming, but Noah followed her banking arc, holding formation by sheer force of will. The crowd below had gone silent, every phone raised, every breath caught. 30,000 strangers watching, but for Lena it narrowed to only 2 souls in the sky, hers and his. Maya's voice pushed through, urgent. "Lena, listen. With that weight and that runway, physics says you can't stick it. There's no margin." Lena exhaled slowly, her eyes locked on the horizon. "Then we changed the math." She nosed her Raptor higher, positioning herself just above Noah's crippled jet. Smoke blurred her vision, warning klaxons howled, but she found the pocket of air, the invisible tether between wings. It was insane, untested, forbidden, but it was the only path left. Below, Pike watched the screens and murmured, "She's setting him up for something." Halvorsen shook his head in rage. "She's setting him up for a funeral." The sky pressed down like a storm, heavy with smoke and static. Lena's Raptor slid above Noah's crippled jet, her instruments screaming in protest. The HUD blinked angry red, warnings piling one on top of another, but she tuned them out. All she heard was the rough breathing of the young pilot below her, fighting to keep from blacking out, fighting the machine that wanted to kill him. She steadied her voice, the same way she had once steadied an entire squadron in the middle of a desert dogfight. Calm was survival, calm was command. "Noah, listen to me. I'm going to lock you in. You don't move unless I tell you." "Copy?" There was a hesitation, a rasp of fear. "Lock me in? What the hell does that mean?" "It means you're not flying alone anymore. I've got you." Her tone left no room for debate. On the ground, Pike leaned over the monitors, eyes narrowing. He recognized the setup, though no manual had ever endorsed it. Shepherd winglock. It was whispered about in the halls of the academy, an impossible maneuver, an experiment on paper, deemed too dangerous to test. It required one jet to harness its turbulence to stabilize another, practically welding them together in the air. No one had ever tried it. But Pike saw the way Lena's Raptor was sliding into position, millimeter by millimeter, creating a pressure pocket to cradle Noah's faltering bird. In the tower, voices rose in alarm. "She can't do this. She'll rip both wings off. The slipstream will shear them apart." Halvorsen's face twisted in fury. "Shut her down! This is mutiny in the sky. She's gambling with classified hardware and a pilot's life. She should have been grounded years ago." But Pike's voice overrode the chaos. "Quiet. Watch her work." Lena felt the pull, the delicate balance between airflows, the way her jet wanted to buck and kick against the strain. Every muscle in her arms braced, adjusting by fractions, finding the invisible line. She pressed her body into the seat as if her heartbeat could sync with the machine. She spoke through clenched teeth. "Noah, you're going to feel pressure. Don't fight it. Let me carry you." The young pilot gasped, alarms shrieking in his cockpit, the smell of burning fuel thick. But slowly, miraculously, the wobble in his jet eased. The turbulence that had been dragging him down was now pinning him to her side, stabilizing him. For the first time since the Flameout, his jet flew steady. I don't know how you don't think. Just fly with me." The crowd below watched, dumbstruck, as the two Raptors moved as one, their wings nearly touching, smoke trailing like a banner across the sky. A boy holding a toy jet dropped it in awe, eyes wide as he whispered to his father, "They're dancing." But the dance was brutal. Every correction tore through Lena's muscles, sweat streaking her face. Her HUD flashed hydraulic strain, structural limit, stall warning. Her body screamed at her to pull away. She refused. This was what Marco had meant all those years ago. Her gift wasn't the kill shot, it was the shepherding, the ability to lead someone home through fire. And now she had his son under her wing. The radio crackled with Maya Chen's urgent voice. "Colonel, listen. Crosswinds at the auxiliary runway just spiked, 30 knots. They'll drift into the ocean if they don't angle perfectly." Lena heard it too. She could feel the wind punching at her canopy, trying to shove them off course. She lowered her voice, steady, a mother's tone in the middle of chaos. "Noah, look at me. Forget the alarms. Forget the fire. Look left." Through the haze of smoke and panic, he turned his head. His visor reflected her jet, locked just above his. Their eyes couldn't meet through glass and distance, but he felt her presence like a tether. "Match me," she said. "Every move, no hesitation. Copy." His voice was still raw, but the edge of panic had dulled. They began their descent, 2 broken arrows aimed at salvation. The auxiliary runway loomed ahead, shorter than any pilot would dare, wind tearing across it like knives. Emergency crews lined the strip, foam sprayers primed, ambulances ready. 30,000 people held their breath as the jets dropped lower, lower, engines howling, fire trailing. Halvorsen shouted into the comms, desperate. "She's insane! Abort now! This is suicide!" But Pike's voice carried steel. "Hold the line, Valkyrie." Inside the cockpit, Lena muttered under her breath, words only she could hear. "I lost one Reyes. I won't lose another." The jets roared toward the runway, locked together in a maneuver no one thought possible. Lena's hands moved with surgical precision, nudging throttle and stick, adjusting to the invisible tides of air. Her Raptor groaned, metal straining but held. She spoke into the radio, her voice unbreakable. "Gear down. Now." Noah's voice shook but obeyed. Gear down. His jet lurched, wheels straining against weight too heavy to bear. Flames licked across the fuselage. The crowd gasped. Lena dropped her own gear, the shock reverberating through her bones. She guided him lower, their shadows stretching long across the runway. Wind slammed them sideways. For a heartbeat it seemed they would veer into the sea. Lena snapped her controls, angling her wing into the gust, using her own jet as a shield to block the crosswind for him. It was madness, but it worked. "Stay with me," she commanded. "Still here," Noah whispered. The ground rushed up. Tires screamed as Lena's Raptor hit first, sparks showering, her landing gear absorbing the brute force of impact. She felt the shock tear through her spine, her machine shuddering on the edge of collapse. But she held steady, holding her jet like an anchor. A split second later, Noah's Raptor slammed down beside her, fire bursting from its wing, wheels buckling under impossible weight. His jet skidded violently. "Left rudder, now!" Lena barked. He obeyed, and her jet leaned with him, locking their turbulence, forcing his skid back in line. The 2 Raptors screeched down the strip, metal shrieking, smoke choking the air. Fire trucks blasted foam, sirens wailed. And then, miracle, the jets ground to a halt, less than 30 feet from the water's edge. Silence. For a moment, no one moved, no one breathed. Then the roar erupted, cheers, sobs, the thunder of 30,000 voices exploding in disbelief and awe. Emergency crews swarmed the runway, foam cannons smothering flames, medics sprinting toward the cockpits. In her seat, Lena sagged against the harness, her body trembling, lungs burning. She pulled off her helmet, sweat dripping into her eyes. The world tilted, her vision blurring, but she forced herself to look left. Noah's canopy popped, smoke billowing as he stumbled out, alive, shaken but breathing. Their eyes met across the foam-slick runway. He raised a trembling hand to his helmet in a salute. Lena closed her eyes just for a heartbeat before unstrapping and climbing out. Her legs shook as she hit the tarmac, the weight of 12 silent years pressing down on her chest. But she was standing. She had brought him home. The cheers from the crowd rolled like thunder. But inside the control tower there was only silence. Eyes fixed on the monitors, jaws slack, hearts pounding with the realization of what they had just witnessed. A maneuver no textbook allowed, no simulator had tested, had just saved 2 jets and 30,000 lives. Shepard winglock was no longer myth. It was living proof, and Valkyrie had done it. On the runway, medics rushed to Noah, pulling him clear of the burning wreckage. He coughed hard, ripping his helmet free, his face pale beneath the grime. His eyes stayed locked on Lena as she staggered across the tarmac, her hair plastered to her face, every step heavy but defiant. He wanted to shout, to thank her, but words failed. All he could manage was a hoarse, "You brought me home." Lena nodded once, her throat too tight to answer. Then her knees buckled. Foam and asphalt rose toward her face. Hands grabbed her before she hit the ground. Medics swarmed, shouting, strapping her to a stretcher. She waved them off weakly, but they ignored her protests. The world tilted in and out of focus. And then the voices around her sharpened, urgent, angry, not at her, but at one of their own. Sergeant Maya Chen stormed into the control tower, a datapad clutched tight. Her voice shook with fury. "Colonel Pike, you need to see this. The fuel dump wasn't a random failure. It was locked out in software. Someone tampered with the maintenance logs." The room snapped to attention. Pike's eyes narrowed. "Who?" Maya tapped the screen, throwing the data across the main display. The log scrolled, showing edits, overrides, signatures, and there it was, Major Trent Halverson's access code. A gasp cut through the room. Officers turned, eyes wide. Halverson's face drained of color, then flushed crimson. He barked, "That's fabricated! I never—" But Maya wasn't finished. She opened another file, one buried deep, hidden for 12 years. It doesn't stop there. Look at this. The training mission where Noah Reyes died. It wasn't pilot error. The diagnostics prove it was the same override, the same tampering. Valkyrie wasn't at fault, she was framed. The words landed like a detonation. Gasps, murmurs. Even the technicians who had mocked Lena earlier froze in shame. Colonel Pike's voice dropped to a growl. "You buried the truth." Halverson snarled, desperate. "She was reckless. She would have ruined everything." Pike cut him off. "No, you ruined everything. You killed Noah Reyes, and you nearly killed his son today." Security stepped forward. For the first time, Halverson's bluster cracked. He backed away, stammering, but the cuffs clicked around his wrists. The room buzzed with outrage, disbelief, and finally the weight of justice. Down on the runway, Lena stirred on the stretcher as the medics rolled her toward the barracks. Through the haze of exhaustion, she caught sight of the commotion. Halverson being dragged out in shackles. For a brief second, their eyes met. His were wild with hate and fear. Hers was steady, unreadable. She didn't need vengeance. The truth was enough. Noah broke from the medics and staggered to her side, still trembling, his flight suit scorched. "All these years, they blamed you for my father." His voice cracked, heavy with guilt for the anger he had carried. "I'm sorry, I didn't know." Lena's eyes softened just slightly. "You know now, that's all that matters." Behind them, the crowd's roar shifted into something else, chants clapping in rhythm, the kind of sound that carried not just awe but reverence. Reporters shouted questions, cameras flashed, live streams exploded across the world. But Lena didn't answer any of them. She lay back on the stretcher, eyes on the sky, whispering so quietly only she could hear, "Marco, I kept the promise." The barracks were quiet except for the hum of the ceiling fans. Lena sat upright on a cot, her body aching, a plain t-shirt replacing the sweat-soaked flight suit. On the small table beside her lay the keychain jet, edges worn smooth by years of silence. She turned it over in her palm, listening to the muffled sounds outside, boots striking asphalt in perfect rhythm. The door opened. Colonel Pike stepped in, his face softer than the man who had shouted orders an hour ago. He didn't salute, he simply said, "Captain Hart, you saved his life. You saved this base. And you saved the truth." His eyes held hers, the weight of respect unspoken but unmistakable. Behind him, the hallway filled with uniforms, pilots, Marines, ground crew. One by one they snapped to attention. The sound of hundreds of salutes cracked the air as if the building itself recognized her name. Lena rose slowly, her legs trembling but her back straight. She stepped into the doorway, the keychain clenched in her fist. Outside stretched a formation 500 strong, lined across the runway, saluting in unison. Faces that had doubted, mocked, dismissed her now shone with reverence. Even Jack Donnelly, the retired pilot who had scoffed at her earlier, stood rigid, his eyes wet. Noah Reyes stepped forward from the front line. He raised his hand, salute sharp, voice clear despite the tremor. "Ma'am, I was wrong. I'm proud to follow you." His eyes dropped, but the salute held steady. Lena didn't speak. She didn't need to. She returned the salute, a quiet acknowledgement, before lowering her hand and stepping past them. The crowd parted, silence following her like a tide. Reporters whispered, cameras clicked, but no one dared break the gravity of the moment. She walked the length of the runway, her sneakers tapping against the wet asphalt, each step deliberate. At the far end, the coastal wind struck her face, carrying the scent of salt and jet fuel. She slipped the keychain back into her pocket and lifted her eyes. Above, a fighter climbed into the clouds, its contrail etching a white line across the blue. For 12 years she had hidden, carrying shame that was never hers to bear. Today the world had seen her, not as a ghost, not as a scapegoat, but as Valkyrie. The sky knew her name, and now so did they. She kept walking steady and unhurried into a future finally free of silence. And so Lena Hart walked away from the runway, no longer haunted by silence but defined by the courage that brought her back to the sky. 12 years of exile ended in one impossible flight, one truth revealed, one promise kept. If this story moved you, thank you for watching all the way through. We share these stories because the world needs to remember that even the quietest voices can carry the loudest echoes. If you believe stories like Lena's deserve to be told, subscribe to A Simple Woman's Stories. It helps us bring you more of these untold journeys of resilience and redemption. We'd also love to hear your thoughts. What part of Lena's return struck you the most? Drop your answer in the comments, because your voice is part of what keeps this community alive. Stay tuned for the next video waiting for you on the end screen. Each story is a new step into courage, sacrifice, and the hidden strength of ordinary lives that prove to be anything but simple. Thank you for being here with us.